Right. Before we get into this Baal Shem Tov that we're up to, I want to just mention something that Rabbi Weinberg was talking about, and they published it this past Shabbos about the Indian of Hamtakas Hadin. Hamtakas Hadin is extremely, extremely relevant and important for our period that we're in right now. We have to realize there are two major, let's call it channels, the two major flows of energy that come in the world. One is called an energy of chesed, one's called an energy of din. Now, you can understand the difference between the two if you compare the period of Chodesh Nisan and Pesach to the period of Tishrei, which starts off with din. Rosh Hashanah through Shmini Atzeres, the time of din. Even though it's a yontif, it's a time of simcha. And you have to realize also that simcha and din are very closely related. So when we have simcha during Sukkot, Samachta b'chagecha, it doesn't mean that there's not going to be any din at all. The simcha is within a general atmosphere of din. And the din starts off on Rosh Hashanah, and we know that on Hoshana Rabbah, the day right before Shmini Atzeres, there's a din on water. How much water is going to be available for the world, for Am Yisrael, during the coming year? That's why we use the Hoshanas, which grow in water, so on and so forth. And with the end of the service of the Hoshana, we bang the Hoshanas on the floor. What are we supposed to be thinking of when we're banging the Hoshanas on the floor? What do we do that for? Why are we banging Hoshanas? What are we doing? Just stop banging something with no reason at all? Of course not. There's a lot of reason behind it. If you think about what the Hoshana represents, then we can understand why we bang the Hoshana. We have four meaning. We have Lulav, Esrog, Hadassim, and Hoshana. So the Esrog has the most, let's call it, qualitative of all. It has a taste, it has color, it has beauty. So the Esrog represents the maximum of, let's call it, sweetness. By itself, if you eat esrog, it's very, very sour. But in general, the entire thing, compared to the other minim, the esrog is certainly the most qualitative of all. Then you have the lulav, which is the let's call it the spinal cord, so to speak. It's also very dry, but it's green and it's straight, and there's some positive side to it. Then you have the hadassim, and the lulav represents the date tree. The date tree that comes from a date palm tree, and dates are sweet. So there's some representation of sweetness there, even in the lulav. However, the hadassim, which look like the eye, there is fragrance there. There's a nice smell. People smell hadassim for Bari Min in Havdalah. So there's something good about the hadassim. There's also something pleasant about the hadassim. So even though it's maybe sort of dryish and there's no taste or it doesn't have the color of the esrog, but it is some positive side to it. The arava doesn't have anything. No taste, no good smell. It's void of all of the other positive things. It's sort of empty. So the arava, compared, let's say, to the other extreme, the esrog would represent the maximum inyan of din, yofi and beauty and chesed, whereas the arava which we make up 5 of them to the Hoshana, represents the opposite of din. So that's what the Arava represents. It represents the Midah of din. And when we bang the Arabas or the Hoshanas on the ground, our intention is to knock out the din, to bang away the din, what we call hamtakata din. It's all dependent on what we think about. The stam to bang it, it really doesn't have that much clout. It doesn't have that much meaning. So you should remember for next year, when we're banging the Hoshana on the ground at the end of the Hoshanas in Shul, the kavanah should be hamtakata din, a sweetening of the din. And those men who buy a Hoshana for their wives or for their daughters who don't go to Shul Hoshana Rabbah, they bring them home, they tell them to bang it on the floor. They also should be taught to have that kavanah. We're banging the Hoshana on the ground. We want to knock out the din. We want to sweeten the din. That's what we're doing when we bang the Hoshana on the ground on Hoshana Rabbah. So there's an inyan to sweeten the din, and we do it with our kavanah, with our actions. We sweeten the din, and we need a lot of din sweetening the period that we're in right now. We have to understand that when tragedy comes to Klal Yisrael, we always don't look to blame others. We always have to, the way the Jewish philosophy works is, since we are the main reason Hashem created the world, as we learned in Bereshis bara Elokim es hashamayim v'et haaretz, Chazal darshan Beis Reishis. There are 2 reasons, 2 main themes or objectives in creating the world. One was for Torah and one was for Am Yisrael. And that they should both join together. So Am Yisrael and the Torah are a couple that have to be married, so to speak, always together. We have to be attached to the Torah. We have to be learning the Torah. We have to practice the Torah. When that does not happen, when we go against the major theme of the creation, Bereshis, bara Elohim es hashamayim v'et haaretz, Bereshis, the Chazal darshan for 2 reasons that are called Bereshis. Klal Yisrael is called Bereshis, and the Torah is called Bereshis. These are the 2 main characters in the creation of the world. Everything else is subordinate to them. So when Am Yisrael, for some reason, has a separation from the Torah, they don't practice it, they don't learn it, they don't have any connection to it. If it goes on for too long, and for too many people, one of my teachers, Rabbi Victor Miller, that's how, who is quite well known in America. He never came to Eretz Yisrael, as far as I know. Maybe he did once in his lifetime for a visit, but he had many, many Talmidim. I was one of them in America. He used to come to our yeshiva in America 3 times a week to give us shiurim. And after I left America, he became even more famous, and they started putting out booklets about his shiurim, and they're still being circulated today. And anyway, he said he was in Europe before World War II. He was trying to give us an explanation of history. Why did the Holocaust happen? He said he was there before World War II broke out. He went to learn in yeshiva in Europe, and the way he describes it, now don't forget, he's one person, and they didn't have in those days television. This was before World War II. I think the television started to come out in the 50s. And they didn't have television. Radio they did have. They didn't have, certainly not cell phones and those kinds of sophistications. So he only was able to see what he saw with his own eyes. And he described to us in the yeshiva in America, when he used to come to us, that in Europe there was massive, he would say massive Chilul Shabbos in Europe, in the period before World War II. And if it's massive, that means to say a large amount of people, and it was widespread, and went on for a long time, and most of the Jewry in the world was concentrated in Europe, not in America. America, they started to come, and after World War II, I guess the greatest exodus came, and people started to populate America. But before that, Europe had the greatest concentration of the Jewish people. And from his observation there, that there was massive Chilul Shabbos. Trying to give an explanation, people ask, why did the Holocaust happen? Where's God? So he's saying we should not look to blame others. When things go wrong in history, they don't go according to the desired plan. We have to realize that the fault lies with us. The fault lies with us. Now, I'm not being tried to be makatre. This is not a way that we approach, let's say, historical events and periods. We always try to be a sanegor for Klal Yisrael. We always try to be a pleader for Klal Yisrael, not against Klal Yisrael. But that's have to keep in mind. But also, we also have to keep in mind the reality. Unfortunately, even though there is a great increase in people becoming more Torah-oriented in Baalei Tshuva, especially now after this episode here in Gaza, there's a lot of Hisoris, a lot of awakening to do Tshuva. But the majority of Am Yisrael in Eretz Yisrael, and by the way, Eretz Yisrael today has the largest single concentration of the Jewish people. The second largest concentration is in the United States. But the largest concentration of one in any one place is in Eretz Yisrael. And of course, all the Jews in the world combined, of course, are a larger number than exists in Eretz Yisrael. But in any one place, Eretz Yisrael has the largest concentration. And we know very well, what are the statistics? How much of the largest concentration in Eretz Yisrael is religious? It's well known that the majority of the population here are considered to be what they call in Hebrew, Mesorati. It means they are traditional. 95% would fast on Yom Kippur. And they would keep some of the holidays here and there, and some of the Shabbos here and there. But that's about it. The amount of Torah learning, the amount of real observance is only for the religious and call it the Haredi community, which are a minority, a tremendous minority. The vast population of the country is Mesorati. Now, if you think about what just happened, when did this happen? It happened on Shmini Atzeres, on Simchas Torah, which happened to be also Shabbos. And what went on? Who was one of the first ones attacked? One of the first ones attacked was that party that they were having down south. What is it, a kibbutz or a moshav? I don't know exactly where it was. But what were they doing on Shabbos? Were they celebrating Simchas Torah? We're not blaming them, because we can assume when we have to be the Sanegor, we have to be their defendants and that they're prosecutors. We have to say that they're Tinokos in Ishbu. They didn't get the chinuch, they didn't know better, and they're going away for a holiday. Sukkot is a time of vacation for many people, and the last 3 days of Sukkot they had this music festival, or whatever it was down there, the 3 days, and Shabbos being the last day. And that's when it broke out, because they weren't celebrating Simchas Torah, their music festival. These are basically people who are not observant. And that would be a very good simon. The most of the country is not observant, and Rabbanim here are trying for years and years and years to be machzir people for tshuva and so forth. but it's very, very slow. Even though there is times where you have an upsurge after the 6-Day War, there was an upsurge. But the midah of din is still applicable on Sukkot. The midah of din goes all the way until Shmini Atzeres. We say the David Hashem Ori V'Yushvi until Shmini Atzeres. Why do we say that capital of Tehillim, David Hashem Ori, twice a day? Because that capital of Tehillim is ma'orer, it arouses the Yud Gimel Midas of Rachamim. In that capital of Tehillim, there are the Shem Hashem Yud Kei Vav Kei mentioned 13 times. The Yud Hey Vav Hey is the Shem of Rachamim. And you say it 13 times with that intention, that kavanah, it arouses the midah of Rachamim, which we say in Shul all the time. Hashem Hashem Kel Racham V'Chanan. We say it on Shalosh Regalim. We say it on Rosh Hashanah. We say it because we want to be on the times of din. We want to be ma'oreh than the dinim of Rachamim. And unfortunately, it built up to a certain point that it had an explosion, and it took place on Shmini Atzeres, on Simchas Torah. In addition to that, we have another cause of what happened on Simchas Torah, on Shmini Atzeres. When we have all of these occurrences in life, we don't follow the rule. We don't stick to the Torah. We don't keep Shabbos. But there is something that we do keep, and that is a strong, warm relationship bein adam lechavero. When we have that, which we call achdus, we have unity. That, because we're together, provides a protection to calamity, to tragedy. It's a umbrella of protection. Why is that so? I'll tell you why it's that so. David HaMelech, was saying, even though people would be not following the Torah, they're not following the Torah, but if they have that element of protection, the unity, then things will not break out and explode like they just did on Shmini Atzeres. Why is that so? That is so because of the following. There's a pasuk in Tehillim, which was described, which is used, or David HaMelech wrote, which tells it all in 3 words. David HaMelech said in Tehillim, Olam Chesed Yiboneh. When Hashem created the world, his original plan was the Olam should be an Olam of Chesed. That's how he wanted the world to operate. What does that mean, in Olam of Chesed? Chesed means kindness. That means everyone is supposed to be helping everyone. And should not be on oneself. The emphasis in life should be on helping the next person. So who's going to worry about me? If I'm worried about the next person all the time, take care of him, who's going to take care of me? The answer is simple. He's supposed to be worrying about you. You worry about him, and he'll worry about you. That's the way it works. That's the way God wanted it to work. And people should not be self-centered, think about themselves. That is a kind of avodah zarah. When you think you have to worry about yourself and you're it, you're taking away from God's original plan. God's original plan was people should be helping other people. Everyone helps somebody else. And why is it that so? Because every person has a little bit of God in him. Everyone is a Tzelem Elokim. So if I'm helping the next person, I'm honoring God. So at the same time, as me giving cover to another person, I'm also giving cover to Hashem. I'm honoring that you are a creation of God, and I am therefore honoring you. And I'm not thinking about myself. But once I start thinking about myself, I come first, then I am putting you in second place. Whether I get to you at all is another question. I may not even get to you, because I'm always worried about myself. my selfishness. That is, in a sense, an avodah zarah, taking away the emphasis from Hashem that Hashem wanted, realizing that every human being is a tzelem Elokim, is an image of God, and when you're helping the person, you know that he has a neshama inside him, and that neshama comes from Hashem, so you're honoring God too. So you accomplish both things by honoring another person, by helping another person. That's why David HaMelech said that's what Hashem's plan was, to have an olam of chesed, that everyone helps everybody else. You accomplish two things: you're helping the person, and you're also honoring God, respecting a creation that God made. I said in my previous shir today, I was giving earlier in the morning, people were asking the question about the Mechalel Shabbos for a non-Jew. Now, we know that when a Jew is in danger, pikuach nefesh, some kind of nefashos of some kind, we have to even be Mechalel Shabbos to save his life. We push Shabbos aside, and we call the ambulance. We may have to take him ourselves to the hospital, ride in the car, turn on the lights. Whatever we can do to save his life, we do. We are Mechalel Shabbos to save a person's life. What happens if the person is not Jewish? Are we supposed to do that also? Be Mechalel Shabbos to save a person's life. Now, the halacha is, if you just look at the bare halacha, it says that we should do that for a Jew. Be Mechalel Shabbos for a Jew. For a non-Jew, we're not required to be Mechalel Shabbos. Not really required. I think we're not allowed to. However, what would all our doctors, our Jewish doctors in the hospitals today, what would they do if a non-Jew, which is quite possible, enters the hospital and he needs treatment? So would the Jewish doctor say to his superiors, I'm sorry, I'm not going to be Mechalel Shabbos, take the blood of this person, give him tests and so on for a non-Jew? If he would do that, no Jew in the entire world would be safe going to any hospital. It would be a world reaction against such behavior. Therefore, we must, and that is the halacha, we must be Mechalel Shabbos for non-Jews as we are for Jews as well. But the dry halacha is, as much as we are careful and honorable and respectful to a non-Jew, and if we find a non-Jew during the week who has suffered a heart attack, who is passed out or whatever, we have to do everything to help him to save his life. Everything we can. Shabbos, however, is something else. But even Shabbos, in our times, it's almost impossible to avoid it. You must be Mechalel Shabbos even for a non-Jew as well. So we're saying here that the world was built on chesed, even for non-Jews, for animals. We have to do chesed to animals too. That's the way God wanted the world to work. And if the world would operate on that principle, there would be no need for police. There would be no need for armies. There would be no need for weapons, for atomic bombs, for rifles, for ammunition, because everybody's life mission is only to help others. It's a beautiful, harmonious world. That's where Hashem wanted the world to work. But once you have a distraction, or you have an antithesis to that principle, where people start thinking about themselves only, and they don't follow God's original plan of Olam Chesed, then every 5 years in Eretz Yisrael you have a war. Then you have a World War II. Then you have a Holocaust. Then you have an Inquisition. Then you have whatever you want to call it. Then you have Yetzias Mitzrayim, or the Golos in Mitzrayim. It all comes as a result of not following the Torah, number one, or not maintaining the Achdus, not maintaining the unity. The unity, one helping the other, provides a protective umbrella on even those Jews who are not religious. And we find this mentioned in Chazal. We have a comparison of the age of David HaMelech to the age of Achav. Achav was a king in Eretz Yisrael, a Jewish king, but he was an idolater. And idolatry, because the king was an idolater, idolatry was rampant in his times. People being transgressing the Aseret HaDibros. Anochi Hashem Elokecha, I am the God, you may have no other gods before me, and people were worshiping other gods. That makes God very angry. And that should cause Klal Yisrael to be at war with its enemies, because we're not following the Torah. And interestingly enough, during Achav's reign, people went to war with neighboring, and they all came back alive and unmaimed. Absolutely amazing. What protected them? What protected them? They're not following the Torah. They're idolaters. And nevertheless, they're returning home unmaimed, healthy, and everything's fine. Compare that to David HaMelech's time. When you have David HaMelech Yisrael Chai V'Kayam, they also had many wars, and very often in his wars, even though they may have been success, the soldiers came back very often wounded, they died. It was a very great danger to be on the front lines in David HaMelech's army. Why? There was no idolatry in David HaMelech's time, not anything close to what went on in Achav's time. The Gemara says clearly, in Achav's time, there was achdus. There was respect. Everybody had respect for another human being. Even though they were idolaters, but they had that awareness that you must respect another human being. And that achdus was the protective umbrella for them. Whereas in David HaMelech's time, it did not exist. Certainly not to the degree that it did by Achav. And therefore, unfortunately, there were many, many losses at war in the army of David HaMelech. So, what do we learn from this? In our lives, today, in Manazeh, in Eretz Yisrael, we need two things to have a successful life here. Since the beginning of this Medina, 75 years ago approximately, there's been a war almost every 5 years. Unfortunately. Right now, what is going on in Eretz Yisrael? There are two things which are minus. The majority of the country is unfortunately non-religious. And as we saw in the last year or two, especially now, before Sukkot and on Yom Kippur, we saw what happened, the desecration of Yom Kippur in Tel Aviv, where people wanted to come together, the non-religious, the Masorati people wanted to come together and worship Yom Kippur in Tel Aviv. No, it was a protest, a physical protest against it. And also the machlokas that went on in the country for the judicial reform, against the judicial reform, split the country. Where's the achdus? No achdus and no massive religious observance is the perfect formula for failure. And unfortunately, that's what happened. Unfortunately. Now, I am not being mekatre. I'm teaching what we have to do in order to correct the situation. We must correct the situation. We must take those 2 points and work very, very hard. Everyone in his own way, in his own little circle, where he lives, to do everything to increase and enhance achdus and also observance. Those two things. Observance of the Torah, keeping Shabbos, of course, but we have to do it with a lot of chachma, has to do it with a lot of finesse. You just can't tell people what to do. You have to know how to do it with a lot of love. That is the main character which is necessary to be successful. You have to show and feel a lot of love to everyone, and then they will be much more accepting to listen to what you say. These are the two things that we need to do in our time. Now, getting back to our shiur, this is what Rabbi Yitzchak Ginsburg was giving his shiurim on, and he was basing it on the Baal Shem Tov, which we learned, the Baal Shem Tov. That's what our shiur is supposed to be about, Baal Shem Tov. Our Baal Shem Tov is focusing on tefillah and how to daven properly. That was one of the Baal Shem Tov's main emphases, davening. Why did he do that? Because in his time, there was a tremendous amount of amaratsis. There's a tremendous amount of ignorance. Because of the poverty that existed, people couldn't learn. They had to go work at an early age. There's a tremendous amount of ignorance of Torah. There was also the feudal system, the feudal lords, which the Jews had to work for. They had to work very hard. And they just didn't have the wherewithal to go and learn Torah. The Baal Shem Tov gave them a way to come together and come back to Hashem, and you could do it through tefillah, through Chassidus. And one of the things he mentioned very often in his Chassidus was this inyan of hamtakas hadin. How do we sweeten the din? How do we sweeten the din? This is a major, major point that the Baal Shem Tov makes. And one of the ways that we can do by sweetening the din is by seeing the good within the bad. By focusing on the good. Now, our focus on the good, that blows up the good. And it lets the good become full-blown and overshadow the din, the bad. So we have to focus on the good. Now, what would that be in our times today? Well, what's going on in the world at this time, there is a tremendous amount of hisorus in the Jewish people, especially in Eretz Yisrael. By the way, I wanted to mention one little story that I heard from, I don't remember which source it was. Maybe somebody was telling it over on the radio. I heard it. There was one young man at that music festival down in Gaza, and it was a 3-day festival, as far as I know, Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. And he was there, and this young man, had a custom of eating with his parents on Friday night. A traditional Masorati custom. The family gets together Friday night, even though they may not be especially religious, but they have a family gathering Friday night. They eat together the Leil Shabbos. Some do make Kiddush, some don't make Kiddush, but the family is together Friday night. So he's down there, and it's Thursday and it's Friday, and coming now, the last day of the festival, and he's wondering, should I all the way down in Gaza, I have to go all the way back up to, I don't know where his parents lived, in which part of Eretz Yisrael, but he's debating, he's telling this over after it happened. He's debating, should he go to his parents or just skip this Shabbat? So his Yetzer Tov went out, and he decided he's going to go, not to disappoint his parents, he's going to go to his parents for Shabbos and leave the festival. So he left on Friday night, he came, and he was so exhausted from the two days that he spent there that he couldn't even eat with them, and he slept through the whole meal. But the next morning, at 6:30 in the morning, was the beginning of the raid, beginning of the pogrom. and he was safe up north someplace or in mid-marriage in his parents' home. Disappoint them, even though he wasn't religious. So that is a very important piece of information to have and to tell everybody else about it. This is the way we are successful, by following the Yetzer Tov, by honoring our parents, by trying to keep the tradition as much as we can. That's also part of the Achdus, being together with the family, not being separate. That's part of the Achdus. Rabbi Chaim Shmulevitz was the Rosh Yeshiva of Yeshivas Mir. He was Nifter, all of Shalom Azechet Tzadik Levracha, and he was in Europe, in Yeshivas Mir, before World War II. And they had, by some kind of diplomatic ties, they were able to get, they all knew what was going on. They already heard about the uprisal of the Nazis, Yimach Shemam, what was going on. They were in Yeshivas Mir, and they tried to make efforts to get out of there. And they all needed to have passports. And somehow they got passports to go to, I think it was Japan, and there was one, and they all got passports. They all expected to leave in a certain time, and there was one young man who wanted to take leave and go home to his parents to say goodbye, not just to leave and go to Japan or China, wherever it was that they went, with the yeshiva. In other words, what did he do? Even though he had good intentions, his intentions were to say goodbye to his parents. So it's a bit of a kasha. Why didn't the parents protect him, keep it up and protect him? But by doing that, he broke the achdus. He was together with a whole group of talmidim in yeshiva, and he left the protection of the achdus. All of them left together. They all were in Japan. They all went with their passports that they were able to get, and because he left the group, he didn't have the protection of the achdus, even though he went for his parents. What can I tell you? He went to do a mitzvah to take leave of them, to say goodbye to them. Parents obviously wouldn't be able to go with the yeshiva, but he wanted to say goodbye. It didn't help. He never came out. He didn't make it. So those are the things that we have to remember. These are the way we do Hamtakas Hadin. Hamtakas Hadin is to see the goodness that comes out of the bad. We have a pasuk that we mention all the time, Eis Sarah Hili Yaakov, Umimena Yivasheya. The Baal Shem Tov says the pshat, which will learn Hili Yaakov. It's a time of tzara, of call it trouble, whatever negative word you want to use for tzara. But it says Umimena Yivasheya. From that tzara itself will come the Yeshua. And what does that mean? That doesn't mean that we're going away from the tzara and Yeshua will come from the outside. No. It's much deeper than that. The Yeshua will come from within the tzara. Eis tzara hili Yaakov umimena, from the tzara, not outside the tzara, but from the tzara itself will come the Yeshua. Amazing idea. So what we have to do is realize we're in an Eis tzara right now, and we have to try to find how to use this tzara to bring on the Yeshua. Now we see already there is a arousal. People wanted to come back to Shmiras Shabbos. There were thousands of people who ordered tzitzis, soldiers who ordered tzitzis. And I know there was groups that they were sitting together and winding tzitzis, making thousands of pairs of tzitzis for all the requests of the soldiers who ordered tzitzis. There's an arousal. And it's coming only because of this surah that we're in. If we didn't have this surah, well, they would never have that request to make the tzitzis. Or the Shmir Shabbos that's coming as a result of it. It's unfortunate it has to come this way, but this is the way the world works. So this brings the Hamtakas Hadin. This is the idea. The Hamtakas Hadin was sweetening the din, and it's coming through the tzara that we're in right now. Now the Baal Shem Tov has a pasuk which we have quoted many, many times in our shiur. At the beginning of this section on Tefillah, the Baal Shem Tov quotes the pasuk in Parshas Noach that we just learned. In the Parsha of Noach, at the beginning of the Parsha, Noach is given instructions to build the ark, build the teva. So one of the instructions was Sohar Tasa the teva. Make a window for the teva, and it says Bo itcha el teva. Atav ishtecha v'necha. Come into the teva. So there are two things mentioned over there. First of all, Tzohar Tasa teva, as number one, and secondly, Bo el teva. Bo atav ishtecha el teva. Come, you and your family, come into the teva. The teva is the ark. So Hashem is telling Noach, after you build it, come inside the ark, and you'll be protected from the waters, from the flood. But that also had to have a window where there could be light that could come inside, because it had to be, I guess, pretty well sealed so that all the rain doesn't come in, or the high waters don't come in. Therefore, I guess there weren't many openings in the table at all, except that it's so hot. Now, it's very interesting. Teva is a ark. That's a Hebrew word, Lashon HaKodesh. Teva is an ark. But Teva is also a word. The Hebrew word for word is Teva. We have Rashi Tevos, means beginning of words. The first letter of a word, we always look very often at the first letters of words, so it's Rashi Tevos, the heads or the beginning of the words. So Hashem is telling Noach, Bo itcha v'ishtecha mishpatecha el hateva. Not only does it mean come into the ark, physically, but if you want to, as the Baal Shem Tov is trying to tell us, you want to make hamtakas hadin, you want to sweeten the din in the world, Bo el hateva, come into the word. As we've said many times in the shiurim, jump into the word when you say a word in davening, especially in Shmona Esrei. But even in Kriya Shema, any place in davening, you say a word, realize that the word is not just a dry ink on the page. A word is an entity. It has volume. It has width. It has breadth. It has depth. It's just what we see, a reminder of a concept. An aleph is not just an aleph on the page. There's an entire world behind that aleph, behind the bay, behind the gimel. It's an entire concept. It's an entire network. Every letter is an entire network of kedusha. If you want to be protected, you want to make hamtakas hadin come into the word. Don't just say the word. As you're saying it, think of yourself going into the letters, going into the depth of what's inside the letters. What's inside the letters? What's in there? What's inside the letters is Kedusha, is Hashem himself. Hashem is the one who created the alphabet. And in order for the alphabet to exist, Hashem must be pumping it, supplying it with Kedusha the entire time of himself. Nothing in the creation exists if Hashem does not give it the neshama to exist. So the word, the shapes of the letters, the form of the letters, the entire network of what makes up that letter Think of yourself as diving into it. Go inside it. There you will find the source. There you will find the kedusha. That sweetens the din. The letter by itself is, in a sense, very, very limited. And it's very, very, I would say, detailed in how big it should be, what size, what width, what length. So the letter itself represents the midah of din because it has limitations. There's a certain form to it. Chesed is something without limitations. It's a constant giving, constant expanding, a kindness. You're always giving out, giving forth. Whereas a word, which is constricted, which is very limited, a letter has specific parameters to it. So that is a limitation. Any limitation represents the midah of din. Says the Baal Shem Tov, come into the word. Bo el hateva. You, your wife, your children, all of you, come into the word. Learn to think deeply about the letters that you're saying. When I learned that a few years ago, when I started learning about Shem Tov, and then I started to teach it, my davening changed drastically. You ask the average, you take a look in shul, an average person who davens a normal Shmona Esrei. Average, what we say average person, he's not in a rush, he's not specifically slow. How long would Shmona Esrei take him? Well, 4 minutes, maybe 5 minutes, if he's a little bit slower. Let's say saying all the words, going through each bracha. You know how long it takes me to do Shmona Esrei since I started practicing what the Baal Shem Tov said, it takes me approximately 20 minutes to daven Shmona Esrei. Now I'm telling you that is a compromise. Why is it a compromise? Because if I daven the entire Shmona Esrei, like the Baal Shem Tov said, it would take me over an hour. But I do the Baal Shem Tov's formula, the first bracha, the second bracha, maximum the first 3 brachas. The rest of the brachas, I try to concentrate on the simple translation of the word. But the first bracha especially, I have to picture in my mind, I close my eyes, I try to picture in my mind each letter of Baruch, I picture in mind the base, and I think of myself going into the letter. I'm not just saying it. I am diving into the letter. The next one's a Resh, a Baruch. The next one's a Vav. I expand the letter in my mind and think of myself going into the letter. What's inside the letter? I'm connecting to Hashem, who's inside the letters. Now, to do that for each letter, for each word, takes time. If I'm having difficulty concentrating, so I will not close my eyes, I'll open my eyes and do it following the letters in the siddur. I put my finger on each letter in the siddur. Bo el hateva. Go into the word by looking at each letter individually and diving into it, going into the letter. That way I'm doing what we call hamtakas adin. I'm sweetening the din. I'm bypassing the externals, just the limitations and the form of the letter on the page. I'm going into the depth of the inside. What's inside the letter is Hashem. Hashem is all Ava. Hashem is all Rachamim. Hashem is all Kedusha. That's what I want to connect with. When I connect with that, I am completely protected. I'm out of the world of din. I'm bringing to focus the Ava, the Rachamim. That's what I want to do. That's one way of Hamtakas Adin. That we can all do every single day in davening. And we should take it on ourselves to do that. Because Klal Yisrael is now still in a matzav of din. They're still thinking about going into Gaza and to conquer the land. And that's very dangerous because in Gaza, the Hamas know that we're coming with the public knowledge. But we're saying we're prepared for what they're trying to do and to booby trap us and so on and so forth. We're prepared for that. We know about all the tricks that they may have up their sleeve trying to ruin us as we go in there. But it's going to be very dangerous, even if we're successful. It's still a very great danger. It's still a matzah of din. It's not over yet. So we have to do as much as we can to be mamtik din, to sweeten the din. That's one of the ways we can do it in davening, by going into the letters and connecting with Hashem. That's number one. What happens when we do that is, Sohar, as we mentioned before, Sohar Tasila Teva. Make a skylight, make a opening for light to come into the table. Take a look at the word Sohar. Sohar is spelled Tzadi Hey Resh. Tzadi Hey Resh. Sohar. Take those letters on both sides and just switch them around a little bit. Switch around the Hey and the Resh. Leave the Tzadik at the beginning, and the next two, which is the Hey and the Resh, change it, put the Resh first. The Tzohar, you change it to a Tzadi Resh Hey, it's Tzara. Tzara. Tzara means trouble. We want to change the Tzara to Tzohar. And we do that by going into the words, by going into the letters. We want the Tzara to change into Tzohar. Isn't that beautiful? The Tzara, the trouble that we're in, change it to something which gives light. Tzohar. How do we do that? By Bo El HaTeva. Go inside it. Connect with Hashem. Connect with the Kedusha. Connect with the Pnimius. Tzara will become Hatzohar. So that's one of the things that the Baal Shem Tov has taught us, which we can apply, and we should tell everyone that we know about it. The more people that do it, the more effective it is. We're not supposed to be thinking only about ourselves. We have all of our brothers and sisters. The 350,000 reservists were called up, besides the regular army that's there. Over 250,000 soldiers are now in reserves on duty. We have to worry about, these are our brothers and sisters. We have to make hamtakas adin. We have to prepare the ground for them so that they can come in there and be successful. And we can do that by two ways: trying to spread as much love as possible, trying to spread the achdus, even to people who think differently than us, who don't observe as much, but show them tremendous amount of love and companionship and chesed. Religious, non-religious, makes no difference. We love every single one, and we want to be united with every single one. And the other one is that we can do it through our davening and observance. So that's it for today, Rabbosai. We didn't do too much in the Baal Shem Tov, in the Sefer itself, but this was so important. And I thought that this is absolutely necessary to say in the shir today. Let's hope that it has an expansion and you'll be able to spread it to others around. So we have a big Yeshua very, very shortly. Call to everyone. Any questions? Anyone have any questions? No. All right. So happy to have you next week in Yom Hashem. Tell other people that we'll probably be back here again with the Zoom, unless things become so good that we can have this year back in person again. Halavai. But meanwhile, we're scheduled to be back here again next Sunday. Call to.